Hello there. My name is Nicholas Davidson, and I'm your guest speaker this evening. You may be able to tell from the first few seconds of this video that I don't sound like you. I sound like I come from a long way away. In fact, I do. It's a long way away. It's a small town called Duluth, Minnesota. Hi, my name's Nick. I was just goofing around. I want to apologize right off the bat for the look of the video. I'm doing it in a hotel room in Dallas, Texas. Speaking at an event here, and I got some moments alone. I have 4 kids, and none of them are here, so it's quiet. Listen. And it's weird to be like talking just to the phone. It's kind of fun to have the microphone so close. Hello. I feel like keep it secret, keep it safe. Fly, you fools. Anyway, I'm just. Hi, good evening. I'll be more refined now. I've just been traveling all day. It's nice to see you guys. Thank you for coming tonight. I do currently live in International Falls, and I've probably met some of you. I'm just goofing around. My wife is Jacelyn Davidson. She is the new doctor at the Essentia Clinic in International Falls. And my 4 kids, you'll learn about them over the next few days. So tonight's talk, this first one, is just basically our testimony. It's relatively stream of consciousness. It's just the flow of our lives. Just to give you a little background on where we come from, and let you know what's going on. So that's kind of what tonight is about. The next night we're going to talk about theology of the body, and then the final talk is on the spirit of the liturgy, which sounds like, oh, the liturgy, but it's about the Mass, but it just changed my whole life. So if you get a chance, come back for this last one. So I grew up outside of Duluth in Esco, Minnesota. If anybody's been to Esco, I can't see you or hear you because of a camera. Not because I don't want to, but because we're not, So I grew up in Duluth. My wife grew up in eastern Ohio, about 45 minutes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We met in college. So a bit about our upbringing. We both grew up in a Christian denomination called the Assemblies of God, or the Assembly of God. My wife's dad is an Assemblies of God pastor, and her grandpa was a pastor, and her great-grandpa was a pastor. We met and got married at Bible college, and we became missionaries to China from 2004 to 2006, and we were there with the Assemblies of God. It was a wonderful experience. China was amazing, difficult. That's a whole other talk, but the missionary life is, my wife has known since she was 10 years old that she was called to be a missionary, and I've known since I met my wife that I was going to be a missionary, because I think it was the first date. She made it very clear, and I was like, yes, I as well, too, have always wanted to be a missionary. So we went to China first for 2 years. That was great. And then let's see. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So we were both raised in the Assemblies of God, which used to be very anti-Catholic. It began as an anti-Catholic denomination. In fact, in the beginning of their roots, very, very good people, very Christ-centered, loving people, very led by the Spirit, but they also had some misconceptions about Catholicism, as do many. And they used to go on to college campuses and try to evangelize Catholics away from the faith into Assembly of God or Protestantism, whatever branch. And so the denomination I grew up in, that was my heritage. That was my background. In fact, my family, my great-grandma left the Catholic Church. She came over from Poland, and they left the church. And it was a definitive moment in our family's history. And so it's quite the winding turn to get here, where I am today. So getting into college, I went to college in 1996, and I was very emotional. I loved God, but I also had this nagging, cynical, skeptical, I was kind of overly analytical side to me going into college. And you kind of, like finds like. So I found people of like mind. And so I had a group of friends. We were like, they were just the scowlers. They just sit back and everything, no matter what it was like, oh, really? Oh, prove it. Like that was kind of, and some of you might be that way, and you didn't have this weird looking face as me, but like inside, that's the way you are. Just like, oh, really? Yeah, prove it. So that's the way I was. And anybody, especially guys around 21 years old, 20, you're starting to find yourself, you're thinking for yourself and thinking outside the box. And I didn't know what was going on, but I kind of came to a pivotal point in my life where I looked around me and I had so many questions theologically about what I was seeing at the Bible school I went to and the way people behaved. I would look at chapel where everybody was behaving so perfectly and praising the Lord. And then I would see in the dorms and people didn't seem any different than anywhere else. And I kept thinking to myself, like, shouldn't we, sorry, I have an eyelash that keeps tickling me all day. So shouldn't we be different? Is Christianity just being a little better every day, till you die? And then you go to the happy place. I didn't know. And I had a lot of questions, and I wasn't asking the right people and whatnot. I'm not blaming, but I got really cynical and really skeptical, and I hit a crisis point where I just gave up. I was in the chapel in front of 1,200 people or whatever, and I just had a real crux moment where I just said, God, I need something from you, and if I could just get something from you, then I'm yours. And I waited and waited and waited and waited and waited for a very long time up at this altar, kneeling and praying, and I didn't get anything. No response. And me in my, 20-year-old angst, I don't suggest any of you do this ever, but I just, in anger, I stood up and I gave the double middle finger to the altar and stormed out of the chapel, right up the center, because I was a drama major, so you have to stomp right at the center aisle. And I know people were like, oh, he's marching to hell right now. He's on his way. Watch him go. You can smell the fire and brimstone. So I marched up to my dorm room, and I was so mad inside. And because basically not getting the answers that my mind was craving. And I called my mom. Back then, phones had cords on them. It was amazing. So I picked it up and dialed my mom, and she answered the phone, and she said hello, and I just launched in with all of my anger, and like everything, this is a kid's story. I could make this up. I don't need this. This is BS. Blah 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 blah. And I'm not going to quit school because I know you're helping pay for it, but I'm done with this crap. Blah 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 blah. And I got done, just spent, and there was this pause, and then my mom said, "All right, well, if you die atheist, I'll always love you. Call me next week." Click, and then she hung up on me. And I remember being in my dorm room just because I was prepped for a fight, because I thought my mom would be as mad as I thought God was. I thought God was so incredibly mad. He's never seen 2 middle fingers in his life, and he was in heaven just, Gabriel, tell me when it's over. But so I thought my mom would be as mad as I thought God was, if he existed at all. And so my mom's immediate response to my anger was just saying, all right, I love you no matter what. Just call me next week. It did something in me. I didn't know at the time. Like the day I became an atheist, I always say is the day I stopped being an atheist. It was a full year, though, of my life where I lived a practical atheism. I didn't go to church. I didn't pray. I didn't do any of that. I still went to Bible college, and you were forced to go to chapel, so I would sit there. But it was done inside. And so that was, through that year, eventually, obviously, I came back, and that's a whole other talk as well. But struggled through a lot, and finally came to, I always say that I felt like I was just chipping through something, like trying to dig through this hard surface to find truth. My whole life I've been digging, and I finally, this one fell swoop, hit it and just fell, and for a while it felt like I fell into nothing. Like it fell into emptiness. But what I realized after about a year was that might have been the most honest moment, or maybe the first honest moment of my life, where I wanted all the junk and extra to be pushed away, and I just wanted what was true. I didn't want hype. I didn't want good preaching. I didn't want great music. I didn't want anything that felt good. I didn't want feels. I just wanted what was real. And I couldn't articulate that at the time, but that's what I wanted. And I think after that year, I realized that something in the center of me, some core thing that hadn't been there before, was just there. Just this like solid piece that, everything that came after that, you'll learn about me and, our life as missionaries and as Christians, that never left. That it kind of like, it started something that never went away. There's just a calm that has never gone. And Scripture would call it like a peace that passes all understanding, like something that beyond. I don't know why, but I'm at peace. So that was all in very young, and I had just met my wife when I was going through all of that and the cynical, and she saw past it and still liked cynical, weird me, and so and she, on the other hand, she had a great upbringing. She loved church. She never even needed to go through a faith struggle in the way that I did, because people are different. You don't. So if you're listening, and you're like, I can't identify with this guy. That's fine. You don't have to be able to, but that's what we went through. So we met each other, started dating, and I guess there's a bunch of that's just for a different talk, probably for the TOB talk. But we got married in 2001, and just a couple months after we got married, my wife, the psychology department, she was going to school for psychology. They had a connection with some missionaries in China, and they got to go just work in an orphanage for 2 weeks or 12 days. And so she left. It took a couple days for her to get to a phone where we could talk, and she got on the phone, and her voice was just different. There was a calm that, and so I said, "How's it going?" And she said, "I don't know, Nick. I feel like I'm home." And I didn't, it was crazy because she was only on the continent there in China. She was only there, I guess it would be like 8 days all said and done because of travel on each side. But by the end of those 8 days, I had already filled out applications for us to be missionaries with our denomination, to go back to China in any capacity just to get there. So she got back, and in 2003, we started fundraising to be missionaries, and technically just to be teachers overseas. Basically, you can't be a missionary in China. It's illegal. You can't get like a missionary visa, and you can never be open about being a missionary. But the neat thing is that really, all of the Christian life should be missionary. It should be mission oriented. We are supposed to just live lives that beg the question, so that people get to know us, and they're like, I don't understand how such and such. Why are you this way? Why do you have peace? Why are you joyful? And that's what we had to do in China. And so we went there from 2004 to 2006. So during that time, a lot of things began to happen internally in each one of us, and then also as a married couple. So married-wise, my family didn't do marriage well, doesn't do marriage well. My mom and I never knew my biological father. He was abusive and alcoholic. I met him when I was 18. And the dad that I had growing up we're close now. He's a great guy now, but he wasn't a good dad or a good husband back then. So they got divorced when I was 17. And then my aunts and uncles were addicts and abusive, and my grandma and grandpa are still married, and they hate each other, but not like cute old person hate, but just so I shouldn't laugh, but I do. So anyway, marriage, I didn't know how to do marriage, right? But I always said that I would do it differently than my family. So then my wife grew up her parents had a great marriage, a solid family, parents still held hands, all that sort of stuff. And so we had very different ideas of what relationships would be. And we'll talk about that in the next video about theology of the body. Needless to say, we got about 4 years into our marriage, 4.5 years. We're in China. You don't have any of your normal family friends. You can't read anything that's on any sign. You can't just go to the movies. Nothing is the same. You have not one normal crutch ever. Everything is different. And we started to crack. And at the same time, my wife started to struggle with severe clinical depression, which we didn't know. In the denomination we grew up in, at the time, it's different now, but at the time, you didn't acknowledge that. Depression was not chemical, it was demonic. It was, spiritual influence. Now, some of it might be, but there was no place for a medication or just going to a therapist and talking through some stuff. And so we didn't know what was happening. My wife began to be suicidal. Our marriage started to crumble. A couple times talked about divorce. I felt like I was losing my mind. I'm not the smartest person, as you can probably tell. And so I started to just feel like I was cracking. And at one point, I remember we lived in this apartment building, and I slid open the window to jump. And I remember thinking I'm only 5 floors up. I'll just get hurt. And that would be so typical of me. You can't even do that one right, yeah? You're mangled, limping. So I didn't, but that was actually the moment that I remember as I slammed the window shut and went into on the floor of the bedroom in our little apartment, in China, and I laid there, and I just emotionally, I felt like everything was crushing down on my back. I didn't have any answers. None of my God answers or God questions had been answered. I didn't know how to do marriage apparently, because I said I wouldn't become this, and I just did the same thing. My wife, I felt like, was leaving me. Like everything, our lives just seemed to crumble, and it was very scary. My wife, one time in the midst of, before we knew it was depression, she was trying to make a pie crust, and everything was difficult over there. Like you had to make tortilla chips by hand. You had to cut the triangles and deep fry them, and you couldn't drink any water from the faucet. And if you washed your lettuce and there was a drop of water left on it, you didn't dry it fully, then you'd be sick for days. So it was just, everything was stressful, and she had burnt a pie crust and threw it down and just grabbed a knife and was just like, we were at the edge of everything. And with no answers. And I remember laying on the floor, feeling like I'm just breathing out all my air from what's pushing down on me. But even in that moment, being cognizant of not God next to me or just with me, but like in me. Just, yeah, okay, you might crush. People fail all the time, Nick, but I'm here. I'm with you. I am in you. And so needless to say, we made it through that. We ended up the next morning, I called my boss and I was like, hey, Howard, I think we have to fail. I think we have to go home. And he was great. He said, okay, all right, that's fine. And that seems to be like something in my life where I didn't realize God could be so just, not casual, not flippant, but at ease. Because like in my worst moments, I'm or freaking out. And the person that God puts in my life will just be like, okay. And so I told my boss, I think we have to fail. And he said, okay, all right. If that's what you need to do. Now, if you stay, if you go home now, you guys don't have any resources. You don't have a job. You're kind of up a creek. If you stay, I have resources. And just let me make some calls. And by morning, he had booked these 2 counselors, a married couple, on a flight to China. And they came and saved us, basically, saved our marriage. So while that was happening, I was also enrolled in the Asia Pacific Theological Seminary based out of the Philippines. And we would go out of China, go to Thailand once or twice a year, and they had these conferences where you could just go study. And I was studying master's level theology. And I remember when it kind of came to a crux for me, because here all this emotional stuff is happening and we're starting to get it right. We're starting to figure stuff out. But the God question, which ends up being the biggest question of any question, just hovered. It wouldn't go away. And I remember being in one of the classes, and there's about 30 of us, master's level. No, this is master's level. And we're I don't remember the topic, but let's just say it was baptism. We'd get together and I realized what was happening was we were sitting around this table and the professor would talk and then we would dialogue on it. You're trying to dig through and get to something, like try to find some common ground and find some depth. And so somebody would say, regarding a verse on baptism, as just an example, but somebody would say, well, I've always believed it was this. And then the person next to them would be like, oh yeah, I could see that, but I've always believed that it's this. And the next person, like Pastor Bob, would be like, well, yeah, you guys are close, but I've always believed it's this. And that was the tagline. That was everything was. And what I realized, people were putting their opinions on the table. And we'd go around and then they'd be like, all right, let's take a break. We'll come back in a bit. And everybody would scoop up their opinion and then head out and we'd be drinking Thai tea and be like, I think we're making some headway. And I remember going like, what are you talking about? We're not, no headway. You haven't said anything that sways me. And I haven't said anything that sways you. We're the same people we were when we started. And I started to realize I don't think we have any answers. And I realized one of the taglines that we had, in my group of friends was, well, everybody has a little bit of the truth, so we all need each other. And that sounds great. You might have said it before. But then I started to think about it, and I'm like, well, but if that's true, let's say me and all of you in the room right now, we all have a little bit of it. So the Methodists have a little bit of the truth, and the Presbyterians have a bit of the truth, and the Baptists and the Lutherans, and not the Catholics because they're not Christians. No lie, we never once mentioned Catholics because they're not Christians. But everybody's got a little bit of the truth, so we all need each other. And I started to think to myself, okay, that'd be cool if that were true. But I asked one of my friends who is a Southern Baptist children's pastor, and I asked him one day, okay, so you're saying I have some truth that you don't, and you have some truth that I do. He said, yeah, we all need each other, man. I said, amen, amen. So what truth do I have that you don't have that you're going to take? You're going to set down where you're wrong, and you're going to embrace what is true about the Assembly of God. And he paused, and he's like, well, I'm like, see, shut up. Just don't use rhetoric. Don't use a tagline if it doesn't mean anything, because you're not changing. No question I've ever asked has made you change. And no question that you've ever asked has made me change. We're in the same spot we were years ago when we met. And I started to ask that of all my friends, and I even met with my pastor of the church that I was going to in Duluth. This is when we got back from China. And it just seemed like nobody had anything. It was always, and basically we fell back on, well, you can never know the whole truth, Nick. And that just seemed really wrong. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So you're saying I can never fully know Jesus. And so what happened was we made it back to America in 2006, We came back to the States after our 2-year stint. In order to fix our marriage, we knew some people in North Dakota who they had a basement apartment right up by the Walhalla, North Dakota, in case any of you guys know. 7 miles from the Canadian border. They had a basement apartment, and they're just really great people. And they just said, here, we won't bug you. We'll cook you dinner every day if you want it, but just come. And there's endless miles of road. You can ride our bikes. Just come, and just get away from all of it. You can just be bill free, rent free, and just live. And so we went there for about 4.5 months, and we would go on walks for 6 hours, and just get lost and try to find each other again. And try to pray through some stuff. And what we decided, we talked, what do you want to do? I don't know, missionary work for sure, but, total side note, it's not a side note. At one point we were in, and this is a different talk as well, but we were in Cambodia on a vacation, and we were touring the killing fields where the Khmer Rouge had murdered something like 2 million of their own people. And these little beggar kids, one of them had a cut foot on the bottom of his heel. It was cut real bad. My wife had taken out this little first aid kit, Band-Aids and stuff and gauze, and she set the kid down and she cleaned it up, and she put the ointment on it and put the Band-Aid and fixed it up or whatever, and the kid ran off. And this is exactly how it happened. She was sitting there and she said, oh man, it's too bad somebody can't just come here and do that for people. Too bad a doctor can't come and do that. Man, I could become a doctor. I'm going to become a doctor. It happened that fast. And she had an actual light bulb moment where God just said, there you go. That's what I'm moving you towards. That's because that's the way God talks, like the East Coast. That's what I'm doing for you. Yeah, you got it. So actually that trip, that day, she was like, Nick, I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to be a medical missionary. And I was like, cool, sounds good. So we came back to the States, but her semester didn't start till January in St. Scholastica in Duluth. So we went to North Dakota for the fall semester, and I was a pastoral intern. God worked everything out. And we started to realize this: we're going to be missionaries. I want to preach. And here was our agreement. We're not going to switch denominations. No, I don't think the Assemblies of God has all the truth, but I don't know that anybody does. So here's the thing. We're going to hunker down in our denomination. We're going to go to our church on Sunday morning. If you've ever been to I went to a classic Pentecostal Assemblies of God church, charismatic. I always joke that our chandeliers were anchored with chain, like heavy boat chain, because we swing from them and we do it well. And so, and it's very casual. So, you can have a coffee bar in the sanctuary, and you can step over the pew if you need to get on your phone the whole time. It's fine. You don't need to be reverent, because reverent is for people who don't know Jesus, that sort of thing. So we did our Sunday morning, and we'll supplement. So we'll go to our church, and then we'll go to something else. So we went to a Greek Orthodox church. We had been to a Messianic Jewish synagogue once. And my wife was attending St. Scholastica in Duluth, and in early January, she came home one day and said, I saw this poster on a wall over there for like a student mass. You want to try that? And I was like, yeah, I'll try anything twice, we've found in my life. So we decided we'd go one random Tuesday. Oh my gosh, the chair just, whoa. On a random Tuesday night, we went to this mass and had no clue. I was joking. We didn't know what to expect. Like, do you bring your own goat sacrifice, or do they give you a goat at the front? Is there like a pen of goats? Is it well lit? Is it in English? Like we told my family where we were going to be in case we never came back. We had no clue what was going to happen. And we show up, and lo and behold, it's well lit. They have electricity, so that's nice. And a girl was playing a guitar, and it was a song that we actually recognized. It was kind of a Protestant worship song. We're like, okay, all right, we'll sit in the back. And we sat down, and people file in, and the mass begins, and the priest walks in. And I don't know exactly what we expected. I would say it must have been like a 147-year-old on a hover round, just like a motorized cart, just dousing people left and right on his way to death. And like there'd be a ramp he could just drive up onto the altar and park it, and there'd be props for his elbows because he's so ancient. And so this guy walks in, and it's this young priest, and I just didn't know. And he walks in on his own 2 feet. Couldn't believe it. And he walks up, and I don't remember everything about the first mass, but then he begins the homily. And the guy sounds like he's heard of Jesus before. And not only that, it sounds like he loves Jesus. And he's talking about something called theology of the body, and he's talking about this band, U2, and I love the band U2. I'm like, oh, they let priests listen to music. That's nice. I thought every priest's playlist would just be chant upon chant upon chant. Like, here, do you want to share the newest chant? Which would be a priest joke, because there is no new chant, because it's so, that's what I thought. So anyway, everything was, we were behind the whole time. The thumbs, the crosses, the Catholic calisthenics, there's all this, and I didn't know any of them. Then by the end, you're sweating and you're out of breath. And so anyway, the mass gets over, and we're like, don't move. I'm sick of being embarrassed. Just wait till they're all gone and the lights go out. So they all walk out, and we get in line to say hi to the priest, and we wait at the back. And so we get to the front, and we're like, hi, my name is Nick. This is my wife, Jacelyn. We just got home from China. We're missionaries to China. And he said, oh, I was engaged to a missionary to China. And I was like, what is going on? What priests don't date? They come out of the womb with the collar on, and they just throw them in the priest baby pile and ship them off to priest baby seminary. I don't know. I had no clue. It just wasn't nothing what we expected it to be. And so if any of you guys know a guy named Father Mike Schmitz, that was the first priest we ever met. It's the first mass we ever went to. And so we asked him, we said, would you ever mind just like going to coffee and just answering a few questions? And he's like, yeah, why don't you come next week? Which was clever, because he got us back a second time. He's a good looking guy, and he's clever. And so then we went out to coffee afterwards. And so every week from 10 to midnight, once a week for 5 months, we would meet with Father Mike, and throughout the week, we'd make our Stump the Priest list. And we had a sheet of paper on the table of every emotional, theological, spiritual question we'd ever had in our life. And I'd just write it down. And every week we'd sit down, and he'd be like, all right, go. And we'd be like, okay, how about this? And something started to happen. Every week he'd be like, oh, well, that's because of this, and 2,000 years ago, and Irenaeus, and Hippolytus, and Catechism says this, and the Church Fathers wrote that. And we'd be like, okay, number 2. And every week went just like that, just check down the list. And everything that we threw at him, he had this answer for. And if you know Father Mike, if you've seen him, it's always like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, well, it's this. And you know what he never once said? He never once started a sentence, well, I've always thought that. He never gave his opinion. It was always like, well, for 2,000 years, Christianity has done this. Well, in the first generation of the church, so-and-so wrote this. This is what Mass has always been. And so we got to a point about 5 months in. It's in late May, and I remember we're at home, and we're like, all right, we got to go. We got to get to Mass, and then, so what questions do we have? And my wife was like, I got nothing. And I'm like, I got nothing. What does that mean? Like, do we have to become Catholic tonight? Because I do not want to be a Catholic. We never wanted to be Catholic, ever. And so I did it again. Ow. So we met with him, and we're like, do you have any questions for us? Like, had no clue what to say. And so at that point, we entered into a different phase, because we're like, well, shoot, this is a curveball. We never saw this coming. We were hiding it from our families mostly because of they were so anti-Catholic, and they knew that we were hanging out with Catholics. But to be honest, my family thought we were trying to evangelize them, like we were trying to get the Catholics to not be Catholic. And we met some really good people, some young adults groups and college age people just hanging out. and slowly just started to form really good friendship with Father Mike. So it was August of 2007, early August. I was in Florida speaking at a Baptist kids camp with my buddy, and I get this phone call at the camp, and I'm like, oh, that's Father Mike. Okay, and I answered. He's like, hey, buddy, just wondering, would you ever be interested in being a youth minister at a Catholic church? And I was like, you're a lunatic, my friend. You are a loony. I said, I'm not Catholic. He said, well, what if that's not an issue? And so I interviewed at St. Benedict's Church in Duluth, and the priest at the time, he had been hired as a Catholic youth minister before he was ever Catholic. And all 3 deacons were converts, and the DRE was a convert. And so I got hired to be a Catholic youth minister when I wasn't Catholic. And there was no pressure to become Catholic. They just knew that I was falling in love with the faith. And the agreement was, we'll give you a paycheck, but you teach the faith. Don't teach your opinion. You can have as many doubts as you want, but that's not what you're getting paid for. Can you do that? And I said, yeah. And so then, up until that point, I was going to Barnes & Noble. I didn't have a job, so I was going to Barnes & Noble, and I'd bring my wife to class, and I'd go sit at Barnes, and I'd go on the bookshelf, and I'd take the old white brick catechism. I don't know if you remember that one. It's just shaped like a brick. And I'd take that, and I'd sit down at their coffee shop, and I read it cover to cover multiple times. I made notebooks full of notes on it. And when I had to go, I would just dog ear it and like look around and hide it behind other books and just pray nobody wanted to be Catholic that night because it would be there in the morning. Well, then I got hired, and the first day on the job, I'm sitting in my office, and the priest comes in, and he has a big cinder block catechism, the green one, which you guys probably are more familiar with now. And he'd signed it in the front, and he slammed it down on the desk, and he said, there, stop stealing from Barnes. And then he walked out. And at that point, September 1st, 2007, I was receiving a paycheck to study the faith all day long and then relay it to people who are skeptical, namely teenagers. And so myself, a skeptic, I just began to, like every day, all day long, just study the faith. I read, the church fathers, and just as much as I could ingest. I started to feel like that Catholicism is like a Disneyland of theology. Like if you arrive at Disneyland when you're a kid, you're like, you see the first couple rides or like a castle, and you're like, we're going to a castle? Or I guess there's usually the train out front. We're going to a train? And they're like, just wait. And you walk in, and every step is like a new thing, and you're just, I can't believe it's real. Well, that's what it was like for me with the church, because I had spent my whole life, like I said, chipping through and trying to find something and like begging for definitive answers in this world. And I'll be honest, when I give my testimony, I always call it, I'm Catholic because I believe in a loving God. Because I had gotten to a really bitter point where I thought to myself, okay, listen, this is what Christians believe, apparently. Let me sum this up. Christians believe that there was nothing, and then some being said that there'd be something, and then there was. And we believe that being made humans somehow like in his image and likeness. And then those beings somehow sinned, however that happened, and then they got kicked out of a garden, and then God sent prophets all through human history to speak his actual words to them, and that when the time was right, he sent his son, whatever that means. Like, how can God have a son? And born of a virgin. You can't be born of a virgin. And the son is born, and he lives and he raises people from the dead. Doesn't happen. We believe all these things. We believe that at a certain point in his life, they killed him, and he came back. We're like, yeah, I just believe it. All of it. We believe that he rose from the dead. He ascended into heaven. He sent his Holy Spirit, and that Spirit came into the world and inspired some people to write these books down, these letters, and they compiled them. And then as soon as it was compiled and they thumped down the divinely inspired table of contents, and then God was like, good luck. I hope it goes okay. You're never going to understand all of it. You're never going to come anywhere close to knowing all of the truth. But this is just to make things miserable for you. Love you. If we were honest, that's what you have to believe. If you're as a Protestant that I grew up, that's what you have to believe. You have to believe in miracle after miracle after miracle and inspired words of God, and then suddenly we have the inability to process it. And people will be like, no, man, that's God entrusting it to us. No, that's not loving, though. If I had the most precious truth... Now, okay, pause here. If we're talking about a Jewish recipe, like matzah balls or something, fine, I can see God being like, this is the... God being like this. This is the way I'd like it to be, but you can tinker with it all you want. If you want to add more salt or whatever, just make your matzah balls, okay? Just do whatever. It's no big deal. But we're actually, when we're talking about God and right and wrong and sin, we're talking about heaven and hell. We're talking about eternity. We're talking about the fact that when you were created, when you were given life in your mother's womb, you became eternal. You will live forever. You'll live either forever in hell or forever in heaven. And so hell and heaven are in the balance. And if that's true, it is not beautiful to think that God would leave that in our hands. That he would just, gosh, I hope they figure it out. I made them, I love them, I want to spend eternity with them, but the odds are pretty slim. That's not loving at all, in any way. And so I had been asking all my life, why would God the Father do that? I had my dad issues, so it was tough for me to understand God the Father because of the way my dads were. But when it came down to it, I was looking my whole life for something solid. And then I ran into the church and I broke my nose, bloodied my face. And for those 5 months, I gave it everything I could. I gave it every hit, every kick, every jab that I could. And I always came away just a bit crumpled. And then it stood there pristine. And it was. I always explain that it was a lot like, it's like we spent our whole life just clinging to this barrel out in the ocean, floating in the storm, and you're just holding on to it for dear life, and that barrel is Jesus. And if you hold on, you'll make it to shore, and you know you will, because the barrel will not sink. But it gets exhausting, your white knuckles. And so we're floating along, my wife and I, and then suddenly we see this shadow, and we look up, and towering over us is a huge ship. Just this massive ship just floating there. And peeking over the edge is Father Mike Schmitz. He's like, hello! And the church just reached down into the water and pulled us up and laid us on the deck. And actually said, shh, no, we got it. We got a room prepared for you. It's exactly what you were looking for. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to think yet. You don't have to process, just rest. And when it's time, it's fine. And you can come out and you can help out. And so we did. We just collapsed onto the church. And this ship sails. And when we were rested enough, they said, all right, Nick, about as much as we can trust you with is to swap the poop deck. So here's your broom. So then I became a speaker. And God started opening doors where I would go around and tell people about the church. And that's what we got to, is in 2008, we joined the church on the Easter Vigil. And it was difficult. Though we had all the answers we had ever looked for. And all the depth and intimacy with Christ we had ever longed for. And all the healing and redemption in confession that we had ever desired in our lives through the sacraments. It was still bittersweet at the time because my family wrote me off as being influenced by demons and being just a crackpot. And my wife's family was severely wounded by it. They were so hurt. And we knew what we were doing. We knew that it would hurt them. And this is where it comes to the crux, kind of. And there's way more to the story, and call me sometime, we can talk. But the crux of the story was we had gotten to a point where it was just a yes or a no to God. God was just saying, listen, you know what I would like you to do. Are you gonna or not? It's that simple. Not easy, but simple. And what so many of us don't know, what so many Catholics don't know, sitting in the pew on Sunday, what you might not know, maybe this is the first time you're hearing this, that we are not here on this planet to be subpar. I mean, gosh, do you know why you're here? I mean, if you believe that God made humans and he made this world, why? Why? Did he make us so that we can just scrape by? Like, yeah, I guess I try to have a good life. I try to be a good person. Try to live a good life. But that's boring. That's not life. Just trying. What are we doing? What are you doing here? Why'd you get up today? And that's a valid question. I don't mean it in any disrespectful way. Why? What are you doing? Chair fell. Why? Why are you doing it? And what we don't realize is that when God, now go back to the very beginning, when God thought up the idea of humanity and he made these creatures, he made them with a reason. And we'll learn about it in Theology of the Body, but the end game is divinity. He made us pre-fall, before the sin. He made us glimmering, shining, perfect. He didn't make humanity to struggle by. That was our doing. Even daily, that's our doing. He made us to be something else completely than we see around us. We were not made to have broken hearts, broken lives, broken dreams. We're not made to have broken marriages. We're not made for brokenness. That's why it hurts. We're not made for it. We're made for something else completely. We're actually made so that our molecules, because we're a spirit-body composite, our DNA, our electrons, the quarks and neutrinos and everything going on at the subatomic quantum level, that our entire existence is supposed to be divinized. We are supposed to radiate divinity. We're supposed to be really alive. We're supposed to be born and breathe and live as saints. The saints doesn't do it because it glosses it. You've seen pictures of the saints. Oh, the saints look like they've been sucking on lemons, and I'm so happy to be a saint. Like, we're not made for that. We're not that they were, but you know what I'm saying, what I'm getting at. We're not made for that. That's not enough. Sainthood, the way we hear it, because we hear it so often, it just gets glossed over. You were made to be the fully alive, very best you that is possibly imaginable, here and now. And that's what the church offers. That's what the Mass offers. That's what the sacraments offer, is divination, divinity. It's enlightenment. It's escalating. It's ascending. That's what we're made for. The church itself is ascending every year. It's getting closer and closer. It's like a spiral up. That is the church. And that's what we're made for. But that only comes through this one moment, over and over and over. And the moment looks like this. Let's pretend I come to Northome and I have a mansion. I tell you, hey, I got a mansion filled with millions of dollars. It's all yours. It's yours. It's in I Falls. You just got to move up there. You got to relocate, but it's all yours, millions. And you're like, oh, I'm kind of busy down here. Could you bring it to me? And I'm like, well, no, it's. I don't understand. It's just there. It's all you. You just have to go. Are you gonna or not? And with God, He brought us to that question and continually brings us to it. But He's doing the same for you. I don't know if you know that, but every day of your life, God has been asking you, hey, like quietly, peacefully, hey, do you want more? Do you want to rise? Is this good enough for you, or do you want more? Because I have a lot more for you. And so every single step, every day, when you wake up, when the sun rises and God's mercy is new in the morning, you wake up, He's just there again saying, hey, is today the day? Do you want to say yeah today? Say yes today. Try today. And that's what we came to in our life, was like, I know it's going to hurt our family. It's going to offend our family. We lost friends. We lost all our financial support as missionaries. We lost our whole life plan, basically, because it didn't involve being Catholic. And we had to say no to all that. We had to uproot. We had to move. But it was so clear, God saying, yeah, but do you trust me or not? And then that's the big problem facing this world. That's why Jesus, I trust in you, is so pivotal. Because that's what you have to say tonight. I don't know if you know that. When you leave, after watching this tonight, that's what you're faced with, is Jesus saying, and it's different. It doesn't have any, my testimony. He's not asking you to maybe be a missionary or anything like that, but He is asking you to follow Him into depth and transcendency and bliss and beatitude and heaven and happiness and joy and peace and all the fruits of the Spirit. He's asking you to do that, but you have to say yes. We want the Matrix download. We want it to just be automatic, but it's not even made to be automatic. Not now. In this life, it is falling in love with God, and whatever He asks you to do, you say, okay, yeah, I trust you. Because I want to be with you, God. I don't care where you ask me to go. I want to be with you. I always say, if I get home, from this trip and my wife is like, you know what? I know I did 12 years in med school, but I kind of just want to work at Dairy Queen. I mean, I would, at first I'd be like, can you just explain? Just so okay, I'm in, but can you explain? Because there's so much debt. But I would say, okay, fine. If can I be with you though? Are you leaving me or just the job? And God's always saying, just leave the job. Leave the trappings behind. Just come to me. Come to me. If you're weary, heavy laden, I'll give you rest. Come to me if you're lost. I am the way. Come to me if you've been lied to or if you've lived a lie, because I'm the truth. Come to me if you feel dead, because I'm the life. But that involves saying yes. You have to say yes to him. So he's asking you tonight. And again, I don't know in your heart what it is, but you do. And if you don't listening to me now, then just when you go home, just sit alone at the edge of your bed, close your eyes. And it's going to be terrifying, but creak open that door a little, just crack it. Just be like, okay, God, where are you trying to take me? And it'll come to mind, and he will speak to you. And he'll take you where you didn't know you were going to go. And it might look as drastic as what happened to my wife and I. It might not. But wherever he is taking you, it is only towards goodness. It is only towards divinity. It is only towards happiness. And a really good example of that is Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa. Because that woman, you probably hear it all the time, but no one would ever look at her and say that she was ugly, right? She was a wrinkled, small, slight old woman, but you see her and you see a different world. You see other. And we call those people saints, not so that they have a title or not so that they have a spot on the church calendar, but we call that as a result of what they were, what they allowed God to transform them into, what they became. They became that saint. That's it. We just, wow, that person did it. That's a saint right there. And that's supposed to be you. It's made to be you. Not in a like supposed to be and God's upset, but like this could be you. You could have peace that passes all understanding. You can have real life. And that's what I'll close with. Jesus said that. He's overlooking the city of Jerusalem. And he's grieving. And he said, I came to give life to the fullest. He says, actually, I came to set the world on fire. Oh, how I wish it was already ablaze. That's Jesus talking. I came to set your life on fire. I wish it already were. So tonight, that's the challenge for this first talk, for this first video. Just go home, give him a chance to set your heart on fire. For me, my favorite Catholic icon or image or symbolism is the Sacred Heart, the burning heart. I actually, beyond years, decades before I ever knew about the church, I loved that symbol. I would see that around and like a burning heart because that's what it felt like. And that's what he wants, is to set your heart on fire. So let him, and it'll be great. And as I always say, you have a good life. I'll see you on the other side. So that's it for now. I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you later. All right.
Fly, you fools.